You love the idea of me, Diane replied gently. You loved having a beautiful, well-mannered wife who made you look good and never challenged you. But love requires seeing someone, knowing them, choosing them every day with full awareness of who they are. You chose a fantasy. You married a mirror that reflected back what you wanted to see. She opened the door, and Lawrence appeared immediately, as if he'd been waiting just outside. Lawrence will see you out through the private elevator. Your settlement papers will be couriered to you tomorrow. I'd suggest you sign them quickly. The longer this drags out, the more expensive it becomes. For you, not for me. Diane, he tried one last time. Goodbye, Marcus. Her voice was final, a door closing. I hope someday you learn to actually look at the people in your life, to see them not as extensions of yourself, but as whole, complex human beings with their own dreams and capabilities. Maybe then you'll build something real, instead of just admiring your reflection. She turned and walked away down the corridor, her heels clicking with decisive certainty. Marcus watched her disappear, this stranger who wore his wife's face, this titan of industry he'd somehow married and never known. Lawrence cleared his throat politely. This way, Mr. Fenway. The private elevator descended quickly, bypassing the party floors, emerging in an underground parking garage. Marcus's Porsche, Diane's Porsche, he corrected himself bitterly, was already waiting, Natasha visible in the passenger seat. Anxiously checking her phone, as he walked toward the car, Marcus caught his reflection in the polished chrome of a nearby vehicle. He looked smaller somehow, diminished, as if the evening had physically shrunk him. The confident executive who'd arrived hours ago was gone, replaced by a hollow man who'd just discovered he'd been living in a house of cards. He got into the driver's seat, and Natasha immediately started talking, her words a rapid stream of panic and recrimination. But Marcus barely heard her. His mind was replaying 12 years in fast forward, seeing all the moments he'd missed, all the clues he'd ignored, all the times Diane had tried to share her world and he'd shut her down. The book on her nightstand about sustainable architecture that he'd never asked about, the late-night phone calls she'd take in her office that he'd assumed were gossip with friends, the times she'd come home energized and excited, and he'd been too focused on his own day to ask about hers. He'd been married to a genius, a visionary, a woman who was reshaping the world, and he'd never bothered to look beyond his own assumptions. As he pulled out of the garage, Marcus glanced up at the Meridian Tower rising into the night sky, its lights pulsing in hypnotic patterns. Up there, 70 stories above street level. Diane was probably back at the party, accepting congratulations, discussing future projects, being seen and celebrated by people who'd taken the time to actually know her. The price of his blindness hadn't been paid in money, though that would hurt. It hadn't even been paid in reputation, though his career was certainly over. The true price was the devastating understanding that he'd had something extraordinary and never even realized it. He'd held a diamond and insisted it was glass. He'd been married to a queen and treated her like a servant. And now, driving away from the building that stood as a monument to everything he'd failed to see, Marcus Fenway understood that some blindness can't be cured. Some mistakes can't be unmade. Some opportunities once missed are gone forever. Behind him, the Meridian Tower glowed against the darkness, a beacon of vision, ambition, and the quiet, devastating power of a woman who'd waited 12 years for her husband to see her, and then, when he finally couldn't look away, had shown him exactly what he'd lost. The story ended not with redemption, but with recognition that came too late. And for Marcus Fenway, sitting in a car he didn't actually own, driving toward a future suddenly uncertain and small, that was perhaps the most fitting ending of all. The end. The gilded cage Marcus Fenway had perfected the art of selective blindness. Standing in front of his bathroom mirror, adjusting his platinum cufflinks, he admired the man staring back at him. At 42, he still had the sharp jawline and confident smile that had helped him climb the ranks of Hartley Development Group. The penthouse apartment surrounding him whispered of success with its floor-to-ceiling, windows overlooking the glittering skyline, Italian marble countertops, and custom furniture that cost more than most people's cars. What he conveniently forgot, or perhaps never truly acknowledged, was that every square inch of this luxury belonged to his wife. "Diane, going somewhere special?" Diane's voice drifted from the bedroom, soft and unremarkable as always. Marcus emerged from the bathroom, smoothing down his Tom Ford jacket. "Chicago. The Henderson project is hitting some snags. Gordon wants me there personally to smooth things over with the investors." The lie rolled off his tongue with practiced ease. Smooth as aged whiskey, Diane sat at her vanity, wearing one of her usual outfits, a simple cream cardigan over a modest dress, her chestnut hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She was applying a subtle shade of lipstick, the kind that barely changed her appearance. At 39, she maintained a quiet prettiness that Marcus had long ago relegated to the category of comfortable wallpaper. She was there. She was pleasant, but she had ceased to be interesting years ago. "Chicago in November," she mused, meeting his eyes in the mirror. "That's quite dreary. Make sure you pack your wool coat." He felt the familiar twinge of irritation mixed with something uncomfortably close to guilt. Diane never questioned him, never demanded explanations, never created drama. She attended her book club meetings, volunteered at the local library, and hosted intimate dinner parties for his colleagues with effortless grace. She was the perfect corporate wife, supportive, invisible, and utterly predictable, which made her incredibly boring. "I'll be back Sunday evening," he said, kissing the top of her head. Her hair smelled like jasmine and vanilla, the same scent she'd worn since their wedding day 12 years ago. Everything about Diane was consistent, reliable, and deeply, profoundly dull. "Safe travels, darling," she replied, her voice carrying no hint of suspicion or concern. Marcus grabbed his overnight bag, already packed with carefully selected attire for the evening ahead. He wasn't going to Chicago. He was heading to the Meridian Tower, the newest and most spectacular addition to the city's skyline. Tonight was the exclusive charity gala celebrating its grand opening, an event so elite that invitations were treated like golden tickets. Gordon Hartley had secured him a spot. Recognizing Marcus as his top performer, his protege, his eventual successor, and he certainly wasn't going alone. Natasha Volkov was everything Diane wasn't. At 28, she was a supernova of ambition and beauty, with striking Slavic features, platinum blonde hair that cascaded down her back in deliberate waves, and a body she maintained with religious devotion to personal trainers and strict diets. She worked in marketing at a rival firm, and their affair had begun 6 months ago at an industry conference in Miami. She made him feel alive, powerful and young in ways his marriage no longer could. Marcus picked her up at her downtown apartment, whistling appreciatively as she emerged in a scarlet dress that left little to the imagination. The fabric clung to every curve. The neckline plunged dramatically, and when she moved, the high slit revealed an impressive length of toned leg. "You look incredible," he breathed, opening the door of his Porsche Cayenne. "We look incredible," she corrected, sliding into the passenger seat with a practiced elegance. "This is our night, Marcus. The Meridian Tower Gala. Do you know how many people would kill for an invitation?" He grinned, feeling invincible as he pulled into traffic. "That's because they don't have what we have. Connections, drive, and the vision to seize opportunities when they present themselves." The drive downtown was a celebration of their shared ambition. They talked about the people who would be at the gala: CEOs, politicians, old money families, and new tech billionaires. This wasn't just a party. It was a networking goldmine, a chance to be seen among the city's true power players. Marcus had done his research. The Meridian Tower was an architectural marvel, a 70-story testament to innovative design and sustainable technology. It had attracted international attention, with features that included vertical gardens, a revolutionary energy system, and luxury residences that started at $5 million. The commercial spaces were already fully leased to prestigious firms, and the building's restaurant on the 68th floor had a waiting list 6 months long. What intrigued him most was the mystery surrounding its creation. The developer and primary investor had remained remarkably private throughout the entire process, working through representatives and declining all media interviews. Even the building's name, Meridian, offered no clues to its owner's identity. Industry gossip suggested it was a European consortium or perhaps a reclusive tech mogul diversifying their portfolio. Marcus intended to find out tonight. Making the right impression on the owner could be the career move that launched him into the stratosphere. The Meridian Tower rose before them like a cathedral of glass and steel, its facade illuminated in shifting patterns of blue and gold light. A red carpet extended from the street to the entrance, flanked by photographers and curious onlookers held back by velvet ropes. Valets in pristine uniforms moved with choreographed precision. Marcus handed his keys to a valet and offered his arm to Natasha, who gripped it with barely contained excitement. They swept up the carpet, Marcus giving his name to the severe-looking woman with a tablet at the entrance. She scanned her list, and for a moment Marcus saw something flicker across her face. Surprise. Perhaps, or was it amusement? But then she nodded crisply. "Mr. Fenway, welcome to the Meridian Tower. Please proceed to the Sky Terrace on the 70th floor." The elevator ride was swift and silent, the kind of technological perfection that whispered of enormous expense. When the doors opened, Marcus's breath caught despite his determination to appear unimpressed. The Sky Terrace was breathtaking. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city sprawling below, like a sea of lights. The space was decorated with understated elegance. Modern sculptures, arrangements of exotic flowers, and furniture that managed to be both comfortable and artistic. A live orchestra played from a corner platform, and waiters moved through the crowd with trays of champagne and delicacies that looked more like art than food, but it was the guest list that truly staggered him. Marcus recognized faces from news broadcasts and magazine covers. There was Senator Patricia Drummond holding court near the bar. The tech CEO Kevin Zhao was in animated conversation with the renowned architect Julian Voss. Fashion. Designer Francesca Bellini was laughing with the owner of the city's professional basketball team. This wasn't just success. This was power, condensed into a single room 70 stories above the ordinary world. "Marcus!" Gordon Hartley's voice cut through his awe. His boss materialized from the crowd, but something was off. Gordon's usual jovial confidence was replaced by tension. His smile was tight, and his eyes kept darting between Marcus and Natasha with an expression Marcus couldn't quite read. Gordon. "Incredible event," Marcus began, but his boss cut him off. "A word," Gordon said quietly, urgently. "Alone," Natasha squeezed Marcus's arm. "I'll get us drinks," she purred, gliding away with exaggerated grace. Gordon pulled Marcus aside near a massive window overlooking the glittering cityscape. His face was grim. "What the hell are you doing here with her?" The question blindsided Marcus. What do you mean? You invited me to the gala." "I invited you," Gordon hissed, his voice low and furious, "assuming you'd have the basic sense and decency to bring your wife. Your wife, Marcus. Not your—" He stopped himself, jaw clenched tight. A cold sensation began spreading through Marcus's chest. "Gordon, I don't understand. This is a professional event. Diane wouldn't be interested. Gordon's laugh was sharp and bitter. "My God, you really don't know, do you? After 12 years of marriage, you're actually that blind." Before Marcus could respond, a woman in an elegant black suit approached them. She was Asian, perhaps in her mid-30s, with an air of quiet authority that made even Gordon straighten unconsciously. "Mr. Hartley, Mr. Fenway," she said with a polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Ms. Chen requests your presence. She's about to make her welcome address." "Ms. Chen?" Marcus repeated blankly. The woman's smile widened slightly, and now it held something that looked distinctly like pity. "The owner of the Meridian Tower. She's very much looking forward to greeting all her guests personally." She walked away, and Marcus turned to Gordon. But his boss was already moving toward the center of the terrace, where a small stage had been set up. The orchestra fell silent, and conversations began to hush as guests turned their attention forward. Marcus followed, his mind racing with confusion and the first whispers of dread. He spotted Natasha near the front, champagne flute in hand, completely oblivious to the storm building around them. A man stepped onto the stage, someone Marcus didn't recognize. He was tall, distinguished, with silver-streaked hair and the easy confidence of someone born into privilege. He took the microphone with a warm smile. "Good evening, everyone. For those who don't know me, I'm Lawrence Bennett, Chief Counsel for Meridian Holdings. It's my distinct pleasure to welcome you to this magnificent building, a project that represents not just architectural achievement, but a vision of urban development that prioritizes sustainability, community, and innovation." Polite applause rippled through the crowd. Marcus barely heard it. His eyes were fixed on the stage, on the curtained doorway behind Lawrence Bennett, waiting for the mysterious owner to emerge. "The woman behind this vision," Lawrence continued, his voice taking on a note of genuine admiration, "has always preferred to let her work speak for itself. She's a creator who believes in substance over spectacle, in results over recognition. For years, she's been building something extraordinary, not just in steel and glass, but in the very foundation of how we think about space, sustainability, and human connection." Marcus's hands felt numb. The champagne he'd consumed earlier churned uncomfortably in his stomach. She started with nothing but a vision and determination. Through brilliant strategic thinking and an almost supernatural ability to see potential where others saw only obstacles, she built an empire quietly, methodically, and with an integrity that's increasingly rare in our industry. Why did this feel like an execution? Why was Gordon refusing to look at him? "Ladies and gentlemen," Lawrence Bennett said, stepping aside and gesturing toward the curtained doorway, "it is my honor to introduce the founder and CEO of Meridian Holdings, the visionary behind not just this tower, but 7 of the most significant sustainable development projects in the country, the woman whose quiet genius has reshaped our city's skyline. Please welcome Diane Fenway." The world stopped. Marcus's brain refused to process the words. It was impossible. It was insane. There was some mistake, some bizarre coincidence of names. And then she walked onto the stage, his wife, Diane, but not the Diane he knew. The mirror cracks, the woman who stepped onto the stage bore Diane's face, but everything else about her was transformed in a way that made Marcus question his own sanity. This couldn't be the woman who'd kissed him goodbye just hours ago, who'd reminded him to pack a warm coat for his fictional trip to Chicago. This Diane wore a tailored suit in deep charcoal gray that must have cost thousands. Cut with such precision it looked like armor. Her hair, usually confined to that practical ponytail, was styled in a sleek, sophisticated wave that framed her face and made her look 10 years younger. Diamond studs glinted at her ears, not the modest pearls she usually wore, but stones that caught the light with every movement. Her makeup was subtle but expertly applied, highlighting cheekbones he'd somehow never noticed, making her gray eyes appear luminous and penetrating. But it was her presence that truly shattered his reality. She moved across the stage with the confidence of someone who owned not just the building, but the entire city below. Her smile was gracious, yet commanding, acknowledging the thunderous applause with a slight nod that somehow conveyed both humility and absolute authority. Marcus couldn't breathe. The room tilted around him, and he gripped the back of a nearby chair to steady himself. This had to be a nightmare, some stress-induced hallucination brought on by too much champagne and guilt. "Thank you, Lawrence," Diane's voice came through the speakers, and even that was different. Clearer, stronger, projected with the ease of someone accustomed to addressing boardrooms and conferences. "And thank you all for being here tonight to celebrate what I believe represents a new chapter in urban development." She spoke about sustainable architecture, about her vision for cities that honored both human ambition and environmental responsibility. She referenced studies, cited statistics, and painted a picture of innovation that had the entire room mesmerized. This wasn't a housewife who spent her days volunteering at libraries. This was a titan of industry, a woman who spoke the language of power with native fluency. Marcus's eyes darted around the room, desperate for confirmation that he wasn't losing his mind. What he saw made everything worse. No one else looked shocked. Senator Drummond was nodding approvingly. Kevin Zhao was watching with evident respect. Even Gordon Hartley, his mentor and boss, was listening with the attentive posture of someone in the presence of a superior. They all knew. Everyone in this room knew who Diane really was, except him. The Meridian Tower represents an investment of over $800 million, Diane continued, her voice steady and assured. But more than that, it represents a commitment to proving that profitability and sustainability are not opposing forces. Every system in this building, from its energy grid to its water recycling, has been designed to operate at net zero environmental impact while providing luxury and comfort that exceeds industry standards. $800 million. The number detonated in Marcus's brain like a bomb. He'd been working at Hartley Development for 15 years, proud of his role in projects valued in the tens of millions. Meanwhile, his wife, his supposedly simple, unambitious wife, had been orchestrating developments that dwarfed anything he'd ever touched. How? The word escaped his lips as barely a whisper, but Natasha heard it. She'd found her way back to his side, and now she clutched his arm with confusion and growing alarm. "Marcus, what's happening? Is that your wife?" He couldn't answer. His throat had closed, and his mind was replaying 12 years of marriage in fast forward, desperately searching for clues he'd missed. How had she hidden this? When had she been working? Where had all this money come from? And then, with sickening clarity, he remembered. The penthouse they lived in, he'd always assumed it was his achievement, bought with his success. But he'd never actually signed the deed, had he? Diane had handled all that paperwork, murmuring something about trusts and tax efficiency that he'd been too disinterested to question. The furniture, the art, the memberships to exclusive clubs, all of it arranged by Diane, who'd told him she enjoyed managing their household affairs. He'd been so grateful not to deal with such tedious details. His Porsche, a gift from Diane on his 40th birthday, presented as a reward for his hard work, with her smiling modestly and saying she'd saved carefully from her little inheritance. Oh God, what inheritance? He'd never asked about her family, never shown interest in her background beyond the basic facts she'd volunteered early in their relationship. She'd said her parents were deceased, that she'd been an only child. He'd assumed that meant modest means, nothing worth discussing. He'd never asked because he'd never cared. Marcus Fenway. The voice cut through his spiral of realization like a blade. He looked up to find Gordon Hartley standing before him, his face a mask of barely controlled fury. "We need to talk. Now." Without waiting for a response, Gordon gripped his elbow and steered him toward a private alcove away from the main gathering. Natasha tried to follow, but Gordon shot her a look so withering she stopped in her tracks. Once they were alone, Gordon released him and took a step back, as if proximity to Marcus was physically repulsive. 15 years, he said, his voice shaking with anger. 15 years I've mentored you, defended you, promoted you over more qualified candidates because I thought you had potential. And the entire time, you've been married to Diane Chen Fenway, and you didn't even know who she was. Chen, Marcus repeated stupidly. Her maiden name, you absolute fool. Diane Chen, the prodigy who graduated from MIT at 20 with dual degrees in architecture and civil engineering. The woman who revolutionized sustainable building materials with her doctoral research. The visionary who's been quietly acquiring properties and developing them into landmarks. For the past 15 years while you... Gordon's voice dripped with contempt. While you thought she was a simple housewife who arranged flowers and attended book clubs. Each word was a hammer blow. I didn't know. Marcus managed, his voice hoarse. She never told me. She never said anything about... She didn't tell you? Gordon laughed, a harsh sound devoid of humor. Or did you never ask? Did you ever once inquire about her work, her interests, her achievements? Did you even notice that the library volunteering she did was actually sitting on the board of the National Architecture Foundation? That her book club meetings were actually chairing the Urban Sustainability Coalition? Marcus felt like he was drowning. The dinner parties, he whispered. She hosted all those dinners for my colleagues. And you thought that was about you? Gordon shook his head in disbelief. Marcus, do you know how many of those colleagues were actually her contacts? How many deals were facilitated at your dinner table? I met Jonathan Wells, the CEO of Vertex Construction, at one of your dinner parties 3 years ago. He introduced me to Diane, properly introduced me, and we've been collaborating on projects ever since. Projects that have made Hartley Development twice as successful. Projects that you benefited from without ever realizing where the opportunities came from. The ground was falling away beneath Marcus's feet. He thought of all those dinner parties, how Diane had moved through them with quiet grace, asking guests thoughtful questions, making connections, remembering details. He'd thought she was being a good hostess. She'd been networking at a level he couldn't even comprehend. Why? He asked desperately. Why would she hide all of this from me? Gordon looked at him with something that might have been pity if it wasn't so thoroughly mixed with disgust. Did she hide it? Or did you just never look? Did you ever ask her about her day beyond a polite, "How was it, dear?" Did you ever wonder where she went during those charity meetings? Did you ever question why a woman with her education and intelligence seemed content to fade into the background? Marcus opened his mouth, but no words came, because the answer was no. He'd never asked, never wondered, never questioned. He'd been so comfortable with his narrative of the successful executive and his supportive, simple wife that he'd never bothered to verify if that story was true. She built herself a life, Gordon continued relentlessly, where she could work on what mattered to her without the interference of your ego and ignorance. And it worked beautifully. She created an empire while you patted yourself on the back for being the breadwinner, never realizing you were living off her wealth, benefiting from her connections, and coasting on opportunities she created. I made my own success, Marcus protested weakly. Did you? Gordon's eyebrow arched. Who do you think recommended you for the Henderson account? Who do you think convinced me to give you the promotion to Senior Development Director? I'll give you a hint. It wasn't your stellar performance. It was your wife, quietly suggesting that the responsibility might be good for you, that you needed to feel valued and important. The humiliation was total, crushing. Marcus sagged against the wall, his carefully constructed identity disintegrating like paper in rain. And tonight, Gordon said, his voice dropping to a lethal softness, you brought your mistress to an event honoring your wife, an event celebrating her greatest achievement. You paraded that woman in front of Diane's colleagues, her investors, her friends, people who know exactly who Diane is and what she's accomplished. Do you have any idea how that looks? How that reflects on me, having recommended you for an invitation? Marcus's eyes widened with horror. You knew? You knew Diane would be here, that she was... Of course I knew. Gordon's composure finally cracked. Everyone knew. The invitations went out weeks ago with her name clearly listed as the host. I assumed, foolishly apparently, that you'd have the basic sense to realize your wife was Diane Chen Fenway. The Diane Chen Fenway, and that showing up with your girlfriend would be professional and personal suicide. The invitation? Marcus tried to remember. Had he even read it carefully? Gordon had handed it to him with a meaningful look, saying something about an important opportunity. Marcus had been so excited about the exclusive event, so focused on networking prospects, that he'd barely glanced at the details. A commotion drew their attention back to the main gathering. Lawrence Bennett had returned to the microphone, and beside him stood Diane. She was scanning the crowd, and when her eyes found Marcus, her expression didn't change. There was no anger, no hurt, no betrayal. Just a calm, measuring assessment that was somehow more devastating than any emotional outburst could have been. Before we continue with tonight's festivities, Lawrence announced, Ms. Fenway would like to acknowledge a few special guests who have been instrumental in bringing the Meridian Tower to life. Diane took the microphone with a gracious smile. This project wouldn't have been possible without the collaboration of many brilliant minds. I'd like to thank my chief architect, Julian Voss, whose vision matched my own. She began naming people, and each one stepped forward to polite applause. Marcus recognized some of them. Industry leaders, renowned designers, influential investors. The kind of people he'd always dreamed of working with. And finally, Diane said, her voice taking on a slightly different tone, I'd like to acknowledge my husband, Marcus Fenway. Every head in the room turned toward him. Marcus felt paralyzed, pinned by hundreds of eyes like a butterfly in a collector's case. Marcus has been... Diane paused, her smile unwavering but her eyes unreadable. An interesting partner throughout this journey. His presence here tonight with his companion Ms. Volkov has certainly provided tonight's entertainment value." The silence that followed was absolute. Then someone coughed and another person shifted uncomfortably. No one was laughing, but Marcus could feel the judgment, the pity, the second-hand embarrassment radiating from every corner of the room. Natasha, standing alone near the bar, had gone pale. She'd finally understood the magnitude of the disaster they'd walked into. "But personal matters aside," Diane continued smoothly, as if she'd merely commented on the weather, "I want to thank everyone here for their support and collaboration. The Meridian Tower stands as a testament to what we can achieve when we prioritize vision over ego, substance over show, and genuine innovation over mere spectacle." The implied comparison wasn't subtle. Marcus, all show, no substance. Diane, the opposite. She raised her glass. "To the future. To buildings that don't just touch the sky, but respect the earth. To projects that enrich communities rather than simply extracting from them. And to the understanding that true power doesn't need to announce itself. It simply is." The crowd raised their glasses and drank, all except Marcus, who stood frozen in his private alcove, watching his wife, his stranger of a wife, accept congratulations and admiration from the city's elite. Gordon placed a hand on his shoulder and Marcus flinched. "My advice?" His former mentor said quietly. "Leave now, take your girlfriend and go before this gets any worse. And on Monday morning, clear out your desk. Your employment at Hartley Development is terminated, effective immediately. Gordon, please, there's nothing to discuss. I can't have someone on my team who shows this level of poor judgment and character. It's over, Marcus." Gordon walked away, leaving Marcus alone with the ruins of his life scattered around him. Through the crowd, he caught one more glimpse of Diane. She was laughing at something Senator Drummond had said, her head tilted back slightly, looking radiant and powerful, and nothing like the woman he'd kissed goodbye that morning. She hadn't been hiding her true self, he realized with sickening clarity. She'd simply stopped trying to make him see it. She'd let him build his comfortable delusion, his fantasy of superiority, and then she'd let him walk straight into his own destruction. The question wasn't why she'd hidden her success. The question was why she'd tolerated his blindness for so long. And what, exactly, she planned to do now that the illusion was finally irreparably shattered. The Queen's Gambit Marcus stumbled through the crowd like a ghost, invisible now to people who moments ago would have eagerly shaken his hand. Natasha found him near the elevators, her face streaked with mascara, her earlier confidence replaced by panicked confusion. "We need to leave," she hissed, grabbing his arm. "Everyone is staring. I heard someone say that woman, your wife, owns half the commercial real estate in the city." "Marcus, what the hell is happening?" He couldn't answer. His mouth opened, but no words emerged. The elevator doors slid open, offering escape. But before they could step inside, a voice stopped them cold. "Marcus, a moment, please." He turned to find Lawrence Bennett standing there, his expression professionally neutral, but his eyes sharp with disapproval. Behind him stood a younger man Marcus didn't recognize, holding a leather portfolio. "Ms. Fenway would like to speak with you privately before you leave. If you'll follow me to the executive suite." It wasn't a request. Natasha's grip on his arm tightened. "I'll wait in the car," she whispered, practically fleeing into the elevator. Marcus watched the doors close, severing his last connection to the fantasy he'd been living. Then, on legs that felt like rubber, he followed Lawrence down a private corridor to a secured elevator that required a key card. They ascended in silence to the 75th floor, above the party, above the public spaces, into the realm reserved for the building's true owner. The executive suite was breathtaking in its understated elegance. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view that made the Sky Terrace seem ordinary by comparison. The furniture was modern and expensive, each piece clearly chosen by someone with impeccable taste and unlimited resources. Original artwork adorned the walls. Marcus recognized a Rothko and what might have been an early Hockney. This was wealth beyond anything he'd imagined, and it all belonged to his wife. Diane stood by the windows, still in her commanding charcoal suit, looking out over the city she'd helped reshape. She didn't turn when he entered, didn't acknowledge his presence until Lawrence and his assistant had quietly withdrawn. Closing the door behind them, the silence stretched between them like a chasm. 12 years, she finally said, her voice soft but clear. We've been married for 12 years, Marcus. And in all that time, you never once asked me what I did before we met. You said you worked in consulting, he managed, his voice hoarse. I said I consulted on development projects. She turned to face him now, and her expression was neither angry nor hurt, just infinitely tired. You assumed that meant I was an assistant or a coordinator. You never asked for details. You never wanted to know. You could have told me, he protested weakly. Could I? Her eyebrow arched. Do you remember our third date, Marcus? We were at that Italian restaurant in Soho. You were telling me about your big promotion to junior associate, and you were so excited, so proud. I started to mention that I'd just secured funding for my first major project, a mixed-use development in Brooklyn worth $40 million. Do you remember what you said? Marcus's mind raced back through the years, but the memory was fuzzy, distorted by time and his own selective recollection. You laughed, Diane said, and for the first time, he heard a thread of pain beneath her composure. You patted my hand and said, "That's sweet, honey, but let's not talk about work fantasies. Tell me about your real job." You were so dismissive, so certain that I couldn't possibly be operating at your level that I just stopped trying to correct you. The memory came back now, sharp and humiliating. He had said that. He'd thought she was daydreaming, inflating her importance to impress him. And it kept happening, she continued, moving away from the windows to lean against her desk. Every time I tried to share my work, you'd either change the subject or give me that condescending smile. The one that said, "That's nice, dear, but let's talk about important things now." So I stopped trying. I built my life in the spaces you never bothered to look. The book clubs, Marcus whispered, understanding flooding in. The charity meetings, the library volunteering. The National Architecture Foundation Board meets once a month. We call it book club in casual conversation because we often discuss publications and research. My charity work was establishing the Chen Foundation for Sustainable Urban Development. We've funded 17 major projects in underserved communities. And the library volunteering? She smiled, but it was sad. I was consulting on the design for the new Central Library. They named the reading room after me. There was a whole ceremony. You were invited. You said you had a golf game. Each revelation was a dagger. Marcus remembered that day. He'd been irritated that Diane wanted him to waste a Saturday at some boring library event. He'd gone golfing with clients instead, convinced he was making the better choice for their future. Their future. What a joke. Why? He asked desperately. Why stay married to me if I was so blind, so ignorant? Diane was quiet for a long moment, her gray eyes studying him with that same measuring assessment she'd given him from the stage. At first I thought you'd eventually see me. Really see me. I thought love would open your eyes, that you'd become curious about who I actually was. I waited for you to ask questions, to show interest, to treat me like a partner instead of an accessory. And when I didn't, I realized something important. She moved to a cabinet and poured herself a glass of water, offering him none. Your ignorance gave me freedom. You were so convinced of your superiority, so certain you were the successful one, that you never interfered with my work. You never tried to manage me or control my decisions. You were too busy managing your own image to notice I was building an empire. So you used me, Marcus said bitterly. No. Her voice sharpened. I protected myself. There's a difference. In this industry, being a woman means constant scrutiny, constant doubt. Having a husband, even one who didn't understand my work, provided a certain cover. People made assumptions, and those assumptions allowed me to work without the spotlight. I could make bold decisions without every choice being analyzed through the lens of gender politics. She set down her glass with a decisive click. And I'll admit, part of me enjoyed the irony. While you were at your office, celebrating deals worth $10 million and thinking you were king of the world, I was closing contracts worth hundreds of millions. While you were preening about your Porsche, which I bought you, by the way, with money from the sale of a property in Manhattan, I was acquiring land for projects that would define this city's skyline for generations. Everything I have, Marcus said slowly, the full horror dawning on him. The penthouse, the car, the club memberships, the investment accounts Gordon mentioned, it all came from you. Everything you have came from us, Diane corrected. I never hid money from you. I put your name on accounts, included you in investments, shared everything I built. The only thing I didn't do was brag about it or demand credit. I let you believe you were the provider because it seemed important to your ego, and because, frankly, I had more interesting things to focus on than correcting your delusions. Marcus sank into a chair, his head in his hands. The dinner parties. Gordon said. He said you were networking. That you brought opportunities to Hartley Development? Of course I did. You worked there. Your success reflected well on both of us, and Gordon is a good man who deserved talented collaborators. I introduced him to people who could help his firm grow. That's how partnerships work, Marcus. You lift each other up, though I notice you only lifted yourself. What happens now? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. Diane pulled out her phone and tapped the screen a few times. Now we dissolve a marriage that should have ended years ago. My lawyers have already prepared the paperwork. It's a post-nuptial agreement I should have insisted on long ago. You'll find the terms fair considering. Fair? He looked up sharply. You'll keep the Porsche. It's titled in your name. I'll give you $200,000 as a settlement, enough to rent a modest apartment and support yourself while you find new employment. The penthouse reverts to me, as it's held in a trust under my maiden name. All investment accounts will be divided according to actual contribution, which means you'll retain roughly 7% of the marital assets. 7%. Out of millions, possibly billions. It was more money than he'd ever earned himself, but it was a fraction of what he'd thought was his. And if I fight this? He asked, though he already knew the answer. Then my lawyers, and trust me, they're the best money can buy, will demonstrate that virtually every asset you believe to be marital property is actually held in trusts and corporations established long before our marriage. They'll show that your income from Hartley Development was negligible compared to our household expenses, which I covered. They'll present evidence that you've been having an affair, which violates the fidelity clause in our original prenuptial agreement. We had a prenup? Marcus's voice cracked. Of course we did. You signed it at our lawyer's office 3 days before the wedding. You were hungover from your bachelor party and didn't read it carefully. You told me lawyers made everything too complicated and you trusted me to handle the details. Her smile was sharp. I handled them very well. Marcus felt the last pillars of his life crumbling. Diane, please. I know I was blind. I know I took you for granted. But 12 years, that has to mean something. For the first time, real emotion flickered across her face. Not anger, but a deep, profound sadness. It did mean something, Marcus. It meant 12 years of loneliness. 12 years of being married to a man who loved his reflection more than he loved his wife. 12 years of conversation that never went deeper than dinner plans and weather observations because you couldn't be bothered to know who I actually was. She moved to the door, her posture regal and unmovable. I gave you every opportunity to see me. I left magazines about my projects on the coffee table. I mentioned meetings and deals in passing. I invited you to events where my work was celebrated. You never came. You never asked. You never cared. And eventually I stopped hoping you would. What about tonight? He asked desperately. You invited me here knowing I'd bring Natasha. You set this up. You humiliated me in front of everyone. I invited you because I wanted to give you one final chance. Her eyes held his, unflinching. I sent the invitation with my full name clearly printed. I had my assistant call your office to confirm you'd received it. I even had Gordon try to warn you, though I see that was too subtle. I thought perhaps foolishly that you might do 5 minutes of research, that you might wonder why your wife and the host had the same name, that some spark of curiosity might finally ignite. But you brought Natasha anyway, she continued. You brought your mistress to my event, wore the cufflinks I bought you for our anniversary, and walked through my building with all the arrogance of a man who'd built his own success. You proved definitively that you'll never see me. And that's when I knew it was time to stop waiting. Marcus stood on shaking legs. I loved you, he said, and was horrified to realize he was crying.